So are you checking your phone again? Are you playing Pokemon?
Playing Pokemon because I got to clean out my bag.
Okay, get any shinies?
No, I didn't. You did, but I didn't. I'm
I
cleaning
did
my
get a
bag.
shiny. We're live. Nanette,
Oh,
we're
by the
live.
way-
Stop playing Pokemon.
Oh, come on.
How do we sound, everybody? Thank you very much for joining us. How do we sound? How does everything look? I think so far so good. I shaved before. I'm not bleeding. Am I bleeding?
No. I'm sorry.
I always worry about shaving just before a show and then just kind of not doing a good job. And we can hear you. Thanks, Frank. What's going on, Nanette? And by the way, tell a joke since I'm putting you on the spot anyways.
What's going on? Nothing. We're just doing a lot of odds and ends. It's spring break, so I'm getting a lot of stuff on my to-do list done.
Your to-do list is to done? Or
No,
almost
it's
to done?
not to done.
It's not to
It
done.
won't be to done for this week for sure.
So if you watch the show at all, you know that I am a huge spreadsheet and Notion fan.
Mm-hmm.
I use Notion 10 times a day. So I'll create tasks and interview potential interviews for this show in Notion, and then I'll go through that and I'll manage it on the computer. But then I take the phone downstairs and it's like, okay, bring up Notion, and then it's just click, click, click. What do I have to do? Click, 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 and I'm done. You know, well, I'm not done,
You're
but
not done.
I'm not done,
You're done
but at
clicking.
least I'm
You just click
done
for
clicking.
fun.
So love Notion. Nanette just installed Notion on her computer and on her phone, and
I'm loving it.
Loving every minute of it.
The checklist part, I like to be able to check off things.
Yeah. Do you actually put things in, even if you're done? Even if you're done, do you put stuff in Notion and then check it off?
Not after. I don't delete it like you do. You move it down. I leave it there so I can see everything I got done.
No, I mean, do you put stuff in there just to check it off?
No, you do that. I don't.
I do that. It's like a huge accomplishment rush.
Yes. Tonight's sponsored drink is ice water with lemon and cucumber in it, Frank.
Coke. I'm boring. Is it really
decaffeinated? Yeah.
Oh my God.
I got lemons and cucumbers in there. Yum.
So, a lot going on from it. I'll just really quickly tell everybody a lot going on with Supreme Gecko, a lot going on here because you're running down to DeKalb, which is about 2
hours away tomorrow. One way.
As an estate executor for a big estate, actually. And it's a lot of time and effort. And I'm not going to go much further into the details there, but it's a lot of time for you. And I think you're a champion for doing this. Absolutely. Me, I'm going to sleep until noon since you're going to be gone, and
Kris
then I'll wake up and I'll
Starbucks at 7:00 and be on the road.
Can you go to?
No.
Can you? Oh, okay. I was going to say, can you go to like Dunkin' and grab me a coffee and bring it home? No.
The coffee pot will be on. No, coming back home would be out of my way.
Maybe you'll bring one back home for me.
Doubtful.
Excuse me. Tonight we have a special guest, and if you don't know him, you will by the end of the show. We're going to have a fun show. We're going to share a lot of information on Kris Hoffmann. Kris Hoffmann keeps a lot of different animals. We're going to kind of jump in here. Can you grab me a waffle?
Sure.
We're going to jump in here. We're going to talk about some of these animals, but our focus is actually going to be how in the world do you keep, and we've kind of touched on this in previous episodes with other guests, but we're going to jump into how do you keep a diverse group of animals, and how do you manage that, and how do you succeed? Because Kris is absolutely succeeding with his collection. So without further ado, let's bring Kris on.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? This is like a record.
This is a record.
You guys, This is record timing. What time is it? What is the time? I can't see it.
4 minutes, 4.5 minutes.
You did this that quick?
Wow. Because I wanted Kris on, because we have a lot to talk about, and I don't want to waste his time. Thanks for joining us tonight, Kris. Greatly appreciate you coming on. I've watched you on, I'm going to throw out, a blatant plug for Gecko Exchange podcast. Jason and Anthony do such an amazing job. You've been on there at least 2 times. I know, one with Dave. Twice. One with
Yeah.
day geckos and one with Sordidactylus.
Yeah, the day geckos one was also Halmahera geckos. It was kind of a half and half.
It's funny you kind of transition off into some of these other topics in a
Yeah.
session like that. So
Well, Anthony had gotten a Halmahera, so he was really interested on getting kind of my take on keeping the species. It was something new to him, so he was like super excited to really talk about those Halmaheras.
and I can see that about Anthony as well. He'll jump in and just absorb every piece of information he can get on any animal. So that's really cool. So what we like to do here is before we jump into the animals, before we talk about the details, before we talk about the facility and closures and all of that stuff, I want to know about Kris. I don't think in either of those shows we really, you guys didn't really delve into who Kris is. I could spend an hour telling everybody how Wally and Nanette are different from other people, but give us a little bit of background on Kris and how you're different and what kind of things you enjoy in life, and maybe even touch on what you do for a living.
So I live in North Carolina. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina right now. I've been living here since 2007. My mom and brother and sister lived here before I moved out here. So, but I was born and raised in the Bay Area of California. So in San Jose, just outside of San Francisco, and lived there till like my late 20s. So yeah, total lifestyle change, moving to the East Coast and the South and all that. So yeah, and just little hobbies. I mean, this outside of animals in general, because I also I keep quail, I have turtles and a dog and chickens and outside of the reptile stuff. But I like just being outdoors, taking the dog for a walk and trails. I like playing a lot of disc golf. That's one of my fun hobbies. So, and then other than that, just living life day to day, working and managing the close to probably 300 reptiles on top of that. So, but yeah, other than that, nothing crazy and exciting.
It sounds crazy and exciting. I've got to ask you. I apologize. Did you say South Carolina?
Yeah, North Carolina. I'm in Charlotte.
North Carolina.
What's the weather like right now?
Today was like mid 80s, low to mid 80s today. Wow. So a little warm for this time of year.
Nice.
So,
we're going to be at 35 tonight.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit different in the land of the frozen tundra, Lambeau Field, that's for sure.
Yeah, we had a cold winter this year. We had some days, a couple ice days and a couple snow days. We don't get snow every year, but we're typically, we go a good 2 months or so during the winter with below freezing, maybe the highs in the 30s to 40s. But it's not like a 6-month winter by any means.
I've been to North Carolina. My son lived in North Carolina he went to South Carolina. Beautiful, beautiful country. I like the gradual seasonal changes. You at least get some of those changes. They're a beautiful country. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. A lot of good reptile shows out in that area for sure. I'm sure that either keeps you busy or it's something that you're going to get into shortly with all the animals that you're producing.
I do mostly just the Charlotte show. Okay. It comes 4 times a year here to Charlotte. The Repticons do. So
that's a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot in this area within a 2 to 3 hour drive. I mean, there's between here to Raleigh to Columbia, South Carolina to Asheville, Fayetteville. I mean, there's probably 25 shows within a 3 hour drive of Charlotte a year.
Oh my gosh! And 3 hours for a show really isn't that bad.
No, not horrible. No,
it's not. Nanette, watch the comments. And
I am.
You got it. Cool.
I like to sleep in my bed, so You know, I pretty much just do Charlotte at this point. I've done a couple. I've done Asheville. I've done Raleigh. I've done Columbia a couple times. But you know, by the time you pay for a hotel and you travel, and you know, when I work full time, so you know, it's you know, to dedicate your whole weekend, especially with travel time, you know, and then you're right back in the swing of things Monday morning. It's just it's tough to do too many shows a year.
You say back into the swing of things Monday morning. Monday morning is then after a full 3 days of shows because you're pretty much prepping Friday and then you get into a Saturday and Sunday, or maybe even the show's Friday. By Monday, it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting because then you come back to, okay, I have to, you know, put away animals Sunday night or start cleaning enclosures, cleaning empty enclosures and moving animals around and, you know, to fill empty holes and spaces and stuff. So that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I usually do about half on Sunday night, putting away, and then the other half like Monday night, and then start spraying again and feeding again and getting back into that cycle. You know, so
it's fun, but it's a lot. Tell us about your setup as far as, you know, number of enclosures. And, you know, we're not trying to compare and judge or anything like that, but we're trying to get some kind of a perception of your collection. And I know it's quite an amazing collection, but give us a count and the types of animals that you're keeping.
You know, I have a mixture of like exos. You know, you can see the PVCs behind me. Those are 18 by 18 by 36s. I do tubs. You know, it's just, you know, it's hit and miss on what people think about doing tubs, but I find it to be, for one, easier to control temperatures, humidities, especially keeping tropical species. Tubs are just, you know, you're making your own vents, you're drilling your own holes, you know, you're controlling all that as opposed to like the screen top enclosures and things. So easier to clean. There's just so many benefits, I think, to it. You know, especially for babies, you know, when they're such a small animal anyways, just like little shoebox tubs for the first couple months with like some of my species, you know, like cresties and gargs and stuff that are hatching. It's just easier to maintain, see how they're, you know, doing, how they're eating, pooping, you know, all those types of things. But, you know, I do have a mix. You know, even like I use bigger tubs for some of my breeders, like especially with gargoyles. It's just so much easier to find eggs during the breeding season when you have tubs. You just lift the tub up, you can look from the bottom, you can see the eggs at the bottom. You know exactly where to dig, and you're not digging up a whole planted vivarium, you know, every couple of days to find eggs, which you're gonna probably miss some eggs as well. But you know, I do have plants in a lot of my stuff as well, so I'm not completely just like, you know, by any means nothing's bare bones. So it kind of depends on the species, you know, what you're keeping as well. I just kind of focus on what's best for the animal, in my opinion. How, you know, how well they're thriving. If things aren't doing well, then I change things up. If, you know, it's a lot of obviously trial and error. I've been keeping reptiles pretty consistently since the late 90s is when I really heavily got into it. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a little older than I look.
You look like you're 22, so that would put you.
No
I'm trying to count back, and
no, I just turned 48, so I've been keeping, like I said, I've been keeping, and I got into breeding a little bit after that, but you know, like late 90, like 98, 99 was when I just kind of started working at a reptile store in California, and just my mind was blown. You know, I've had things as a kid, but I started getting everything: chameleons, geckos, snakes. I mean, I was just like, I want everything, one of everything, you know. So yeah, but you know, it was a lot of trial and error at the beginning. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from going to shows. Back in the day before the internet was available. I used to go. I grew up in the same area as Julie Bergman, so I went
Oh,
to a
yeah.
lot of shows and talked to Julie quite a few times, and just kind of picked the OG's brains. That and reading Reptiles magazine was, you learn a lot from those types of things. So, and of course, everything's just, it's trial and error. So
It really is, and I think that people need to realize that. And oh, we could talk about Tubbs all night. We could talk about Julie Bergman all night. She's top of the list in my book. She's top of the list. We could talk about the whole experience of raising animals, and you're not going to gain all this experience. You can watch the internet and reply and groups and everything for 2 or 3 years. You're not going to be there. You're just not. You have to, at least for me, I have to experience. I have to do the hands-on learning process for me. That's how it works best for me. So we've got a question. Angie is asking, what was your very first reptile? Was it in California? Was it chameleons?
no, so well, I mean, I guess my very first, I would say, I was probably like 10 or so when I was really getting into, like, my parents used to be like, just I grew up in California, so my parents were like, go outside, every day. So I was getting interested in reptiles, and my parents bought me. I'm pretty sure it was I was 10 at the time, around there, but I think it was a golden gecko. Was, I think, the first one that I got. My mom was, of course, freaked out, so I had to keep him in a cage outside, and the whole deal. But when I really started getting into it again, like in my late teens, early 20s, right before I started working at the reptile store, I got a few standing eye, Phelsuma standing eye, and that was what I fell in love with them when I saw them, and so that was the first couple geckos I ordered through the back of Reptiles magazine, and you sent a money order, and the whole old school way of doing it. I got a couple standing eye, then a couple leopard geckos, and then it just exploded from there.
Standing eye. That's the 48-inch long day gecko, right?
Yeah.
That's the big one, though. I mean,
yeah, it is. They're about 10, 11 or so inches. They're the same size as, like, the grandest, the giant days. They're more of a drab color, like a kind of a gray purplish tone with the green head and the kind of bluish tail. Definitely one of my favorite species to keep, of geckos. They're the species I've kept the longest too. I pretty much have always had standing eye.
but as babies, and I agree, as adults, they look good. They look nice. They're pretty cool. But it's babies, they're super cool.
Stunning. Yes.
Stunning. Yes.
Yes, very colorful. The stripes on them are just, their brightness when they're fresh out of the egg is just, it's unbelievable.
Now, was that the hook? I mean, you're keeping some different animals. You talked about the golden geckos. Was that the hook, though, that really grabbed you when you maybe did you? I'm assuming that you bred the standing eye, and was
I have. Yeah, I still am breeding them now.
Is that what brought you into the hobby? Is that what really grabbed you?
Yeah. I think that was the first. I don't know. For some reason, I always kind of leaned towards the geckos. I like snakes. I wasn't a huge fan of snakes. The lizards were a little more my thing, but just the fact of like this quote unquote sticky toe pads, and how they could climb on the walls and those types of things. And it wasn't your typical green day gecko. Like, that was the more common day gecko, with everything was green. I've always been a fan of blue. It was one of my favorite colors. So that kind of that coloration of them was kind of appealing as well, and just something that was a little different. You didn't really see standing eye in the late 90s, like you did, the grandest and stuff like that, and so, like peacocks and the line day geckos and things. And the fact that they were a little bit bigger, it was just like, yeah, it was. I just thought they were kind of a little bit different. Never saw them at any of the shows that I went to, at least that I recall. And so it was just one of those ones. And then, like I said, it keeping those was cool. And then just started, I started going to shows and a little more often, reading Reptiles magazine a little more often. And then, like I said, I started working in an all reptile store. And then that was when I was mind boggled by the amount of animals that were out there that I had never even knew existed and never seen in person before. So
I have about 20 questions, 20 different lines of thought going on.
Yeah.
And I want to get back to the I guess kind of a list of animals that you're keeping right now. But talking about lists, you mentioned that you worked in a reptile show or a reptile store. Did they get the list in, and did you go through the list and say, oh
Yeah, it was a faxed list. It was a faxed list from like Zoom Ed in LA, because they would drive up in a freaking car and bring us stuff to pick from. A lot of wild caught things. I mean, we were bringing in, it was fresh imported panther chameleons, and all the leaf tail geckos and stuff were so readily available at that time. It was just the stuff that, you don't see as often now and coming in wild caught. But yeah, the selection that we had was amazing. Yeah, big monitors, big turtles. It was definitely an experience, especially for somebody when a young and fresh and getting into it, to get that, to be able to dive that far into it right away, and just seeing it was just like I said, it was mind blowing.
I've seen some of those lists, and I've seen some of the animals that have come in. I used to go to LLL Reptiles, and you'd see the little pygmy chameleons for like $15, $20.
Yeah.
So I'll get 6 of them, and it was fun. And like you mentioned, the little satanics.
Yeah.
I remember the satanics coming in for
$100.
Yeah, $100.
Yeah.
And obviously there were problems with that kind of process back then, but and it's great to see more captive bred now that we can kind of establish.
But, we wouldn't have that many captive breds if it weren't for bringing in those imports back in the day. It's
yes.
They would have never been as readily available as they are now, from people really focusing in on certain species, people working strictly with monitors, people working strictly with bearded dragons, or strictly with, leaf tail geckos and things like that, to really expand the quantities that were being captive bred, to where, now I know Madagascar doesn't import very much anymore. There's a lot of things that have been put on lists, and it's very limited quantities coming in. And it keeps it reasonably, I would say, affordable to get some of these geckos now too, because they've been established in the hobby. Otherwise wild caughts would be $2,000 for a leaf tail gecko or something if it wasn't like that. So,
and I see that on Facebook. We have to stop the importation, and but really, that's how I'm repeating exactly what you just said. That's how we establish these populations in the hobby, and started disseminating them more in the hobby and getting them in people's hands that can enjoy them. Now, there's always pluses and minuses to everything, and I completely agree that we need to import less, but we need to import in a more controlled manner. But spot on, man, right on.
100%. And you never know what could happen to something in the wild with a lot of these animals. Deforestation and all these things that are going on out there. With some of these species that have been established in the hobby, it's very possible for people to, start donating babies back to put back in the wild and things like that, to establish colonies back in the wild, and get them protected and things like that. So it's keeping the species alive in a sense as well. Like, us in the hobby are kind of a backup plan if something does go wrong and species are decimated. So, I think that would be a cool thing. I hate to see a species get to the point of endangered or extinct completely, but, we could possibly repopulate certain areas from captive bred animals.
Brad, absolutely. All animals at one point that are in the hobby today at one point were wild. Absolutely.
I mean, so are our dogs and our cats and our birds.
Absolutely. Fish, tropical fish, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go back. I'm going to jump all the way back to the beginning. Let's talk about your collection. You
Okay.
kind of talked about the diversity of the, tubs. And by the way, Kris, I am a huge advocate of tubs used in the right application.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what you're saying. But we've kind of talked about the enclosures. Let's talk about the animals in almost slow motion for those that need to make that connection to the animals, names to what they actually look like. Tell us some of the types of animals that you keep. Now, you just mentioned day geckos and the standing eye.
Yeah.
So cool. And I'm sure some kind of a connection there with Julie Bergman. But what are some of the other animals that you keep?
So the standing eye, I have a few clemeri as well, which are super bold and fun for a faster species, and just amazing how bright they are. New Caledonian species, I have a few cresties. I'm not a huge cresty breeder by any means. I have a couple pairs just to have that kind of lower end animal on the tables for shows and stuff like that.
Yes.
It's a good beginner lizard as well. So I like, sharing that with like the younger kids that are getting into the hobby. So that's always a good one to have. A bigger project, I have gargoyles. That's probably one of my longer ongoing projects, bigger projects. Let's see, I have some Chihuahua. I have a single pet leachie. I have a couple, let's see, I have morning geckos. I have the regular type as well as the yellow bellies. Let's see, I'm looking around the room here. So Hoffmann geckos, that's another big project for me. I like the Hoffmann are a great underrated species in my opinion.
Yes.
Very much kept like the New Caledonian species as well. I have quite a few groups. I have like 6 breeding groups of Tokays.
Really?
Yeah. And man, do they pump out babies. Let's see. I have some Bioactive bovini, so the giant Madagascar velvet geckos.
Yes. Very cool.
I also have the Bioactive Antongenensis. I think I'm saying that right.
I think
there's a smaller one, but just amazing pattern and coloration. They're striped, but they're just again another really underrated species you don't see in the hobby very often. I really like those. I just got some of the barking geckos, the mill-eye. Got a pair of those recently.
Way underrated. Way underrated.
Yeah, and they're hypos too, so they're a little like that more pinkish color than the dark brown. I have some Ordura monoliths, the Australian velvets, which I got those about 2 years ago, year and a half ago. Those are another really awesome, underrated species. Just it's very cool. Just great eaters, easy to keep. Not super heat. Not super warm. Kind of like 80s, mid 80s, low to mid 80s on the drier side since they're from Australia. And then I have some Cerdidactylus, the Zebricus, formerly known as Pigensis. I think it's Zebricus now. Also have the Geckoella Decensis, I think that's the name of them.
Oh, very cool.
The other bent toad. I don't know if they're classified as Cerdidactylus at this point yet, but basically look like a bent toad species. Also have a random one, but a Cerdidactylus irregularis. Yep. Which these are a small one. They're size of like the Zebricus.
Oh, okay.
Kind of a bluish eyelid, brown colored, bluish eyelid, almost like how a leopard gecko is. And then let's see, what else? Oh, some cave geckos. I have a couple species of cave geckos, the heniensis and the Bioactive,
Mhm.
which are definitely one of my favorites.
They're beautiful.
The Bawas. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And personally, I think that's, if you were to ask me like what gecko, I mean, there's probably other opinions and other people's, have preferences, but the fact that those are not the kind of beginner, most popular lizard gecko that you see is, pushed as a starter gecko. I mean, they're probably one of the easiest species to keep. It's just, they're not fast. They're a ground dweller. They don't eat a ton by any means. They're a cricket eater, but room temperature in the 70s, high humidity, you almost kind of leave them alone and forget about them in a sense,
And check for eggs once a month.
And check for eggs, yeah. But it amazes me to this day that the cave geckos have not, kind of rised up the list of probably of like most kept species up with the new cow species.
I tell you, if anybody, Boanglogensis, even Haniensis, you get that in your hand, a 3-inch juvenile, baby or a juvenile, and you get a good look at those eyes. And
oh my gosh.
And the Boanglogensis with the, oh my gosh, orange eyes. I have a preference for orange and everything. So Bioanglogensis, Aranus, the bigger one, the Aranus, and some of the other ones are just, people should be keeping these animals. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they just, the eyes alone, just that like reddish, orangish, eyeball, and they almost look kind of evilish in a way.
Yes.
But they're just, they're slow moving. They're very similar to a leopard gecko as far as, body shape and movability. But, you're not providing 95-degree temperatures. They're not as finicky as leopard geckos are. And I think just as pretty looking, and the variations on the different subspecies and the colors and the patterns that they have. I just think that it amazes me that they're not way more popular in the hobby.
Me too. There's so many geckos like that that we just need to see more people keeping. You'd mentioned Clemeri. I think that's a small gecko. That if you put them up correctly, every person would, instead of having a fish tank with a fish going back and forth, they would have if they knew about these animals, they would have a tank, a 20-gallon or 30-gallon with 5 or 6 Clemeris bouncing back and forth, and little hummingbirds, jumping from branch to branch. And, there's so many geckos like that. 100%, man.
Yeah. And a couple other species that I should mention before. I do have a couple snakes. I have a few hognose that I recently got from a friend who was kind of getting out of the hobby, and some bamboo rat snakes, which I'm really enjoying keeping.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
The Thailand bamboo rat snakes, which are orange with the black racing stripes.
Yeah.
You still can't get them even though they're orange.
They are cool. Yeah, and then that's not a snake fan. I've wanted hognose for 20 years, and I know it's never, ever happening. How big are the rat snakes, though? Are those pretty big?
So they're small as far as most other species of rat snakes. They're definitely smaller. They're maxing out at like, from what I've read up on, I still have juveniles, so they're not full grown yet, but they're only maxing out at like 4 feet.
Oh,
well, that's not bad.
Only 4 feet.
Well, that's not bad.
Well, for a snake, that's definitely, for a rat snake especially.
Yeah.
Most rat snakes are you're closer to 5 to 6 feet for a female rat snake.
So, okay, so I won't get those. I'll get the hognose, which stays smaller. Is that okay? No?
The cool thing about the bamboo rats, too, is they're from the mountains of Thailand. So definitely on the cooler side. They don't want it above 80. So like a high humidity, room temperature, mid-70s, basically kept like the Sturdidactylus and the cave geckos. They're all in the same rack.
I'm going to jump forward now about 3 steps. What's that?
Somebody just asked. Those are the ones that are pretty cold, right?
Yeah. Good call. So I'm going to jump forward real quick here because this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. You've mentioned all of these different animals, and oh my gosh, you have some cool animals. But what you're talking about is day geckos, high light intensity, UV lighting, high humidity, arboreal. You've mentioned cave geckos, which have some similarities, but very distinctive differences. You've mentioned a lot of these barking geckos, certainly, some similarities, very big differences. How do you manage the environments for all of these different animals? Is it enclosure by enclosure by enclosure? Do you do anything different? As an example, for an animal that needs high humidity, cave geckos, do you do something different for them? Kind of walk through for our viewers and for myself and internet how you manage all of these different environments.
So, obviously cage by cage to an extent. It took a lot of dialing in over the years to kind of figure things out, moving things around my house from one room to the next, and all those things. I now have it pretty well dialed in as far as a majority of my cages are all in the room that I'm in here. And so what I do is I have everything from, the velvet geckos, the ordura, to the millide, the barking, to New Caledonian species, to the Tokays and the standing eye that want it, 95 degrees, all in the same room. So my ambient temperature in the room during the summer, the peak is, low, probably 84 at the highest, in the peak season in the summertime. That's when the lights are on the longest, the heat lamps are on the longest, those types of things. So, which again, I do have leachies in here, I have cresties in here, I have gargoyles, chihuahua. They're all in this room getting 85 degrees during the day.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And they've been like that for quite a few years. So what I do is I don't use a lot of lighting with supplemental lighting with, especially the new cow species, adding that extra heat source to the cages or around the cages obviously doesn't make any sense if my ambient is high enough in the room already. So I could keep the standing eye, the Tokays, more on like one end of the room, which is a little bit warmer, which is, all the heat lamps are on that side. And then those heat lamps on those cages are obviously bumping up the ambient temperature in the room to where I kind of slowly shift over. My home air is like it a little bit warmer, the Ordura like it a little bit warmer, to the new cows on kind of the other end of the room, on, I guess you could say, the cooler side, in a sense. So I have fluorescent lights just for, cycle lighting on some of the cages. Like the ones behind me, they each have like just a LED light inside, and that's just for, for light cycle type stuff. So just doing that. And then my cooler species, I have to keep I just keep them in a completely separate room altogether. And it's just too warm in this room for the bamboo rat snakes, for the cave geckos, and the Sturdidactylus species. So those are kept in a separate room.
Perfect. And I'm assuming that you're probably using, higher levels for more heat and keeping some animals a little bit lower if the requirement is a little bit less heat.
Yeah, so like I put, I have heat lamps, 5 Tokays above other Tokays. So the Tokays on the bottom have heat lamps. So the Tokays on the top don't have as high of an intensity of a heat lamp because the heat from the ones below is rising. Otherwise, you're gonna fry the cage and all the animals in it. So you kind of have to be, cognizant of those types of things that you're doing. I put certain cages around like my heater vents and my air conditioning vents. I don't want cages being blasted by the heater vent or the air conditioning vent, depending on the season. It also obviously dries things out a little bit faster as well. So I more put like closed top cages around that, or I cover the screens on the tops. Just those little things that not everybody always thinks about, but when they're setting up their cage. Near windows, all those things. I make those adjustments according to what cage I'm putting in that general vicinity. So
I love that, and I love the fact that you're using your ambient temperature, as your starting point. When I used to do fish, I had heaters running in some of the tanks, Epistogramus, a small, little teeny tiny cichlids, and I had little heaters in those tanks, and that was enough to heat the whole room because we had, I don't know, a bank of about 40 of them. And I had heaters in some of the bigger a couple of the bigger tanks, but I didn't have to use heaters in all the tanks because the whole room maintained. I love the fact that you just mentioned the vents. And it makes me think that I've surrounded one of our vents downstairs with the baby cages. Now I'm not putting it right against the vent, but I have, a space so the vent can blow and distribute the heat. But we have our babies there because the room downstairs gets cold. We have our animals in our basement, and the basement gets cold during the winter, and I want the babies to get, maintain some, mid 70s ish temperatures, and the heat vent does that. So bravo on your part to kind of utilize what you have going, right?
Yeah, you got to be kind of smart with what you're doing. It's by me doing it the way that I'm doing it as well. It also helps with electricity. I don't need to run as many lights, so just trying to be somewhat as efficient as I can. Also, by using a lot of tubs with a lot of things, like I'm not super comfortable with like having lights sitting on plastic tubs, 24/7. Fire hazards, melting, just there's just so many things that you're putting yourself in a position to possibly go wrong. So those things kind of come into play when I'm trying to think about setting up my room. And it's minor tweaks here and there on a regular basis, but it's also it's experience too. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been keeping reptiles for so long. I have friends that keep reptiles as well, so I've gotten knowledge from talking to other people, seeing how they do things, seeing other keepers, collections in person, and just kind of picking my favorite things, or just stealing little tidbits from other keepers over the years, and just to kind of get it dialed in what works for you, and not everything works the same for every person either. One of my biggest things with especially people online, it's like, well, how often do you spray? How often do you do this? And how it's like, and how often is all dependent on where you are. I'm in North Carolina, so my humidity levels are higher here. So my spraying routine is going to be a lot less than somebody who lives in, say, Phoenix, Arizona. Like their air is drier. It's going to dry out faster, especially for tropical species. Their substrate's going to dry out faster. There's so many factors that come into play when you're doing things like that. So it's sometimes it's hard to explain to people. Like, I know it by looking at a cage. I can just instantly look at a cage and be like, yep, right, it needs to be misted today, and
Yes.
It's hard to teach people that, that haven't been doing it for a long time.
A great point. When I got into isopods, my biggest question was, how frequently do I water? I don't know how often. Is it every day? Is it? And our good friend Russ Wilson from Aquarimax Pets, I would ask him probably every week. I still don't think I'm watering enough. I think I'm watering too much, Russ. What do I do? How can you show me how much to water? And he said, you gotta experience it. Well, you have to go through the process. I said, okay, so you can't tell me exactly how much. Is it 1 quart? And he he's a great friend and a great teacher. But some of these things you just have to go through and experience.
Yeah, and it's also about your substrate too. If you're using if your substrate is an inch thick as opposed to 3 to 4 inches thick, it's going to dry out faster. If you have heat lamps under that cage that has substrate, it's going to dry out faster. Some of my cages, I use a lot of like the cocoa fiber, the cocoa bricks, and a lot of substrate. But then I also do like Reptibark as a layer on top, and that helps keep the cocoa fiber underneath a little more humid and a little more moist a little bit longer than just your cocoa fiber just straight up and exposed all the time. So it's all those, if you have leaf litter, your substrate's going to stay a little more humid. There's so many factors that come into play, and it's just kind of trial and error and figuring it out. And so it's really hard to just tell one person there's one set way of doing things.
Another great point, and you kind of talked through this with the enclosures, but it depends on how much ventilation you have in your enclosure. Is the top, do you have a ventilated top and that's all the ventilation? Do you have a vent, at the opening at the bottom of the doors? A lot of frog keepers have that, flow through ventilation. Are you using plastic tubs? Do you have ventilation on the top and on the sides for crop? It depends so much. You just have to get that feel. And you have a tank that you missed and you turn around and missed everybody else, and then you come back to that tank and it's already dried out. You just have to go through that. Good call. What?
Check the Star. I think there were a couple of questions about his setups in there.
Okay. Let me do that real quick. And viewers, if you have questions, put them in. We're, if they're not pertinent right away, we will come back to them and catch them.
Shoot, I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any.
Absolutely.
I know that there was one by all kinds of questions about his setup.
I think it's maybe this one. How many does he? Bioactive. Do you do bioactive springtails, isopods? Are there any successful hatch, surprise, extra animals in the bins not externally incubated?
I've had a couple things hatch in the tanks before by me missing eggs or something. Not very often, because I'm pretty diligent about kind of knowing when my animals are going to be laying. You can see the females are getting fat, and you can see the females digging and those types of things. It's like if I see a gargoyle digging when I'm feeding one night, I know within the next night or two, to definitely check that cage again. I used to do a lot of bioactive stuff. I've kind of gotten away from it a little bit. I do have a few tanks that are bioactive that have isopods. I don't do the springtails anymore. For some reason, I just didn't spray enough and keep the substrate just consistently moist enough for springtails, because they're pretty finicky. I like to have a dry out period on a lot of my stuff too. So, just to prevent, bacteria growth and, those types of things. So, I'm more of a heavy mister less frequently than like a light mister every single day. I got away from a lot of isopods in a lot of tanks because they eat the eggs. If you miss eggs, especially on the burying, the geckos that bury their eggs, you're gonna run into the soft shelled eggs, especially. I was finding too many isopods were getting to the eggs before I was finding them, like with the gargoyles and stuff. So I got away from that a little bit. But I do have isopods in a couple cages. I have some isopods in the Tokay, one of the Tokay cages. And the Tokays, they glue their eggs up off the ground, so the isopods are never going to really mess with them anyways. So kind of a little bit. I have a few things that are, and most that aren't. But like I said, I have a few things that are bioactive. Especially stuff that's not, especially non-breeding animals. That's where I have my heavily planted, kind of what would be more considered bioactive stuff. So I'm not tearing the tanks up with a bunch of plants in it looking for eggs all the time.
I learned my lesson, and the viewers know this probably already, but I learned my lesson with the Bavaye, finding eggs after I tore the tank down after not getting any babies or eggs for a year, and finding the eggs, 183 eggs behind a plant that I could have never gotten these fat fingers behind. So I didn't do a bioactive. I did a 12 by 12 by 18, but I put rocks down, except for this little tiny area, kind of like you're talking. So you just have to adjust. And that gets back to the whole, I thought about a plastic, tub enclosure to kind of control them a little bit better. And I think that probably would have worked just as well. So,
yeah, like my morning geckos are pretty, tanks are heavily planted. I leave a lot of the plants in the pots, as well. But because once the plants get too big, I swap and I put smaller cuttings of plants in there, and I take the bigger plants out, which is great for the plant growth as well. Because the humidity stays high, the lights, I have lights above them, and when I do cuttings, they usually go in a lot of my morning gecko cages. They also don't trample all over the plants, so they don't, break the leaves and everything else like some of the bigger bodied gecko species. So it's kind of like my little nursery almost in a way for my cuttings of plants goes with the morning geckos.
God, so many things that you're doing are little things that I'm doing here too that I don't remember talking about, and I should be doing video. I don't even think about it. If I pull a cutting, it's going into a morning gecko tank, and I'm putting it in a little teeny tiny pot and dirt, and I just stick it in and start watering the heck out of it. But the geckos, I like the big leafed pothos plants, and they'll just sit right in those leaves up at the top, and they'll adjust. They'll find the gradient that they want, from the lighting above, and it just works perfect.
And with the communal species like that too, they need to kind of get away from each other. You can't have an empty tank or tub, and then the girls are just running all over each other. Even if you have sticks in there, they need that visual barrier. They need those different levels, like you're saying. Gives them places to hide if they're getting chased around by one of the dominant ones in the cage. I keep like 12 or so, 12 to 15, morning geckos per tub. So you have to have that kind of surface area. I always say a big thing with setting up cages is all the more airspace that you have in a tank is just wasted, wasted surface area. It might not be as appealing looking, but if your cage is cram filled with sticks and plants and cork bark and all those things, you're providing more surface area for the animal to crawl on, as opposed to just crawling on the sides of the tank all the time. So,
what size tub are you using for your morning geckos?
I think it's like a 66 quart. It's the decent size one.
Big one.
I use the specifically with them. I do separate eggs from the morning geckos, so I do not let them hatch inside the adult enclosures. And that took a little bit of tweaking to get that perfect. But I like these Ziploc ones that have the foam on the lid.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're the waterproof ones. So when you click the lids on, there's that foam that's in between all the way around on the lid. And so if you do have a baby hatch out, there's no possible way for anything to squeeze out of that cage.
I'm going to steal your thought that you gave from Jason and Anthony's podcast on morning geckos. You talked about PVC. You talked about cork bark. You talked about cork bark, and I hate cork bark with small geckos. Hate it to a passion, because there's always crevices, and they're going to find their way. And then, oh my gosh, it's stuck. I better dig the. So talk about cork bark and what you've designed. I'm sure it's not unique, but I love how you tell the story of how you've designed your morning gecko tanks.
Yeah, so I was having too many issues with my mornings laying eggs kind of for one all over the place. And I was using cork pieces. I wanted them that the cages to look kind of cool, to be planted, have them all that surface area and all that stuff. But they typically wanted to find that little crevice. Even with laying cork pieces on top of other cork pieces, they would find the little crevice, and they would, put a bunch of eggs up under there, and then, or they're under the corner of the cage because the plant got too close to the corner. The eggs were kind of uncontrollable, and it was just they were all over the place. And then I was having trouble finding the babies in the cage, and then you got the lid open, so the 12 adults are jumping out. It became a huge mess, especially with plants in there and everything, and all the decor that's in the tank. It was literally impossible to find babies. And then when I was finding dead ones on the ground. I was finding ones without tails.
Yes.
It got to the point to where it's like, why am I even bothering if it's not going to be, I'm not getting any babies. So what I did is I took every cork piece out of the morning gecko enclosures. I started using really skinny, either vines or skinny sticks, similar to like their body shape and body size, something they could kind of hug when they were running around, which obviously, it also allows for more like sticks to crisscross and all those types of things. And so then I started taking like 1-inch PVC, and I was drilling probably nickel-sized holes kind of all over in the PVC, so the geckos could kind of go in and out, and just kind of would angle them kind of corner to corner, and noticed like I wasn't seeing eggs anymore. And then I could pull the PVC out. You look just down at the PVC, and it's just clusters of eggs and eggs and eggs and eggs and eggs. And so I almost trained them to just kind of go to that one spot. Once a couple of the females lay, the rest kind of follow suit. You can do it with bamboo as well. And that's another little trick, is you just use a decent size thickness of bamboo, and they'll just go in that crevice, that hollow of the bamboo, and do the same thing. But the PVC, so I started using 1 or 2 pieces of PVC in the morning gecko cages. Then every like 4 to 6 months, I would pull that PVC out, put a new one in, and put that PVC with all the eggs in a separate container, and all the babies would hatch in that container. And then they were easily collected.
Right.
And, I didn't have to worry about tearing down and having geckos jumping all over the room. And I'm spending more time chasing geckos across the floor than I am, doing anything else.
Just real quick, I have this rack behind me. It's how many feet away, Nanette?
4 or 3.
Yeah, probably about 4 or 5 feet away. And I've got morning geckos in there. And I was sitting at my, this is my office. I'm sitting at my computer. And you know how you kind of notice something out of the corner of your eye. Sure enough, it was a little teeny tiny morning gecko running across my table. I just put my hand down to, jump right on it, and I put it in a new enclosure. But yeah, I love the Ziploc kind of container top. That's perfect. Your PVC, you said nickel size hole. So if you're using, let's say, a foot long piece of PVC, I'm just kind of envisioning this. You're probably looking at maybe 4 or 5 or 6 holes in that PVC.
Yeah, not a whole lot. I kind of angle it to where they can still crawl on the bottom, they can still crawl on the top. Where the PVC, the ends are. But they just gave them a spot to kind of, as they were walking up, they could kind of dip in, and then it was also easier for me to kind of like reach in every once. Like I spaced them out enough to where when I was going to pull the PVC out, if there was a morning gecko in there, I could kind of stick my finger up in the hole to kind of push her and nudge her to jump out of the PVC. Yeah. So then then I'm leaving the adults in the enclosure. Otherwise you're using like a stick or something and you're poking all the way up the PVC. So this was just kind of a way for me to kind of, quarterly or so be able to kind of push them out of the PVC. Or the babies in that matter too. The babies, they just hang on to the eggs sometimes, and you got to kind of stick something in there or your finger in there to kind of get the babies to jump out of the top.
And you just load it up with these PVC pieces, or you have 4 or 5 in there?
No, I use usually 1 or 2.
Okay, perfect.
Again, I've done 3 or 4 in a tank, and they seem to find that one PVC that they like anyways, and they all kind of follow suit. Once a couple eggs get in there, they just cluster them all together. I mean, I've had girls lay eggs on top of eggs even, to where you can barely even look down the PVC tube. So there was really no need to put more than 1 or 2 in there. And you're just kind of at that point, if they do separate, you have 3 eggs, 4 eggs in this one, 6 eggs in this one, 10 eggs in this one. It's like, if you're doing it 1 or 2, you could just pull the one PVC out and it's got 30 eggs in the one, So it's also simplifying things for myself. When you have a big collection, like you kind of have to find these little tricks that makes your time a little more efficient.
And those little tricks, I tell you folks, are golden. Golden. If you don't have to think about it like every week and just let it go, and then once a month, like you were saying, or whatever, and just pull, that's a golden tip to minimize the maintenance that you're doing for these animals.
Yeah, and another thing too, even with the tubs, a big thing is a lot of people tend to put, if they do use tubs, is cutting the tops, the lids, and putting screen in. Humidity rises and it goes out. So I do a lot of my screens, like where I'm cutting and gluing in, screen. I do it on the front. I just do like a little square in the front as opposed to on the lid, and it does help maintain the humidity level a lot more.
You do something like that, and you can come around with a sprayer and easily spray it as well.
That as well, yeah, without having to pop the lid open or slide the tub out to spray on the top.
Yes.
Yeah.
Plants. Do you do plants in those morning gecko enclosures?
Oh yeah. A lot of pothos. Pothos are a big one. I have some more vine plants. I don't know the exact species of them. Just higher humidity tropical species. Anything kind of viney that you can kind of wrap around the sticks and things like that too. Always do very well, but typically my go-to is pothos. They grow so well in those enclosures. And then, I have so many clippings because they grow so fast and they root so easy. I have an endless amount of pothos that can go in any of the cages. I mean, my windowsill in my kitchen is just like little jars and water and just pothos and, so.
Growing up ready for another morning gecko enclosure.
That's right. Well, my mom's a huge plant person, so I learned a lot from my mom and her plants and how to cut things, how to get cuttings of things, how to reroot things, and stuff like that. So,
folks, just real quick, we have real big lightning strikes out here, so if we lose everybody, I apologize. We'll have Kris on at another time to finish up some of these. I do want to get to some questions because I don't want to leave those sitting here.
Yeah.
Laura is asking, any geckos that you allow to self-incubate or remove all eggs you find, or do you remove all the eggs?
I like to remove all the eggs. That way you can control the environment a little bit better. There's less variables. There's less likelihood of molding or drying out. Keeping them in little deli cups. I don't use an incubator with anything. I use a lot of just ambient room temperature, tricks, keeping them on a shelf in this room. I have, it naturally has that temperature variation as well, which would happen typically in the wild anyways. So I do pull a lot just for a better success rate in hatching babies out.
Makes all the sense in the world. And
No, I will say, sorry to add on to that. No. The Tokay geckos, they do hatch with the parents, which is pretty much uncontrollable because they're an egg gluer. And they're also very, very, as much as they're probably considered the meanest, biggest pricks of a gecko, they are super, super maternal. The dad literally lays on the eggs on the underside of the cork bark, way more than the girls do. And the dad just lays there and protects the eggs, and the babies hatch out. And you're talking about a humongous 12-inch, big-headed gecko that will just snap at your finger when you put it in there, and then you have a tiny little baby that's walking right next to it, and it doesn't flinch at that baby at all, which is awesome, I think.
I've got to tell the story, and maybe Brad's typing. I don't have the live chat up here, but Brad showed a picture of, and he had shown a picture of a baby that hatched out, and a couple of days later, he showed another picture of that second egg, and I can't remember, Brad, forgive me, but it was either mom or dad that was chewing
it
on the egg to get the baby out. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, that is the
He says
coolest
his
thing.
male helps the eggs hatch.
Male. Very, very cool.
Yeah, the males are definitely more protective of the eggs than the female. And I would think likely that's probably for reproduction purposes, that the female needs to get away and recover from laying eggs and fatten up and needs to constantly be eating. And so her sitting there and protecting the eggs is going to kind of prevent her from doing that. And, you know, it's not going to hurt the boy for breeding purposes by maybe not cruising around and doing as much hunting and those types of things. So, yeah, I've noticed the males are definitely way more hanging out with the eggs. Actually, one of those pictures that I sent you that you posted on there, that was the male with his mouth wide open on the underneath of the next to the eggs.
Very, very cool.
Do you take the babies out after that? Somebody's asking, or do you just let them grow up?
Nope. Babies stay in.
Wow.
And you're talking from a tiny little Tokay that's, you know, a couple inches long, really skinny, to big, huge 12-inch, you know, big-bodied geckos, all in the same tank. And I leave babies in there until they're basically subadults. Like, they'll stand there for the first like year and a half with the parents.
I think of Tokays, and I think of Dave Hoffmann that did a video on Tokays. I think it's 10 years now, something like that. But anyways, you know, he was being guided, and he went to a shed. He opened the shed door, and there were hundreds of Tokays in there. And over the years, I started thinking that was probably maybe one or two families.
Probably, yes.
Just over and over and over and over and over and over, and babies having babies and babies having babies and so on and so forth. So very cool fact.
Yeah, the only time I start separating them is if I see, you know, once they're sexually mature, which takes a couple years for Tokays anyways. So I'm usually pretty comfortable leaving them in for about the first year and a half or so. But then, you know, then you're going to have, you know, the sons chasing the mom around. You might have males fighting, you know, as they're getting sexually mature. So that's usually when I start kind of separating the bigger ones. Plus, it's hard to tell once they get big who was the actual breeding pair originally, the mom and dad. So, you know, once they get too big, you got to pull the bigger ones out, because then you're like, wait, am I pulling the right one out? You know, you don't want to mess up that pairing. So same thing with my standing eye. My standing eye, they're very maternal. I pull eggs, I hatch them out, and they go right back in with the parents. And they'll do fine.
I have the giants, and I occasionally will miss an egg. They hide them all over the place. And if I see the babies, I know I've got to grab them, because normally I find one baby. I hardly ever find two babies in that.
Two, yeah.
Yeah, if I miss them. So it depends on the animal. Cave geckos are notorious for being, I don't know if I want to say good parents, but tolerant. Yeah, of the babies. So another animal.
The sternodactyl I've had the zebricus hatch out in with the parents, and I've actually even talked to other people, and the zebricus will stay with the parents as well.
Rooster Cogburn.
Okay.
we have a pair in our bedroom, and we call it Rooster Cogburn because we have the
wakes up at 4 o'clock.
The chirping. Oh, I love it. That's the thing that when I saw a video on YouTube of one of those chirping, that was like I was dead set for like the next 6 months trying to find somebody that had it. The first one I bought was from Jim McDermott.
Yep, absolutely. It was Jim's, and grainy and dark and just the worst video. You know, no complaints, Jim. I'm not complaining. I'm not judging, but I've watched that video 100 times, I bet. Mm-hmm. And like you, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing. Take all of my money. I want one of those. Mm-hmm.
It would have been cooler though if I had known.
Oh yeah, I probably should have told you that they'll wake you up.
Me up at 4
they'll wake you up at
no
10 o'clock, and they'll wake you up at
2
4
o'clock and 4 o'clock.
Well, and it's crazy how small of a species that is and how loud that chirp is. And you think it literally sounds like you have a bird in your house.
We can hear it down in the lower levels.
From the basement, yeah.
Yeah, all the way down. And the dog will perk up downstairs. He'll hear it, and he's like listening right away.
I want to get this question in. Any animals on your wish list that you really want?
Oh my gosh, I could be here all night.
Right. And it will change by tomorrow. It'll change, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot. You know, when I got into it, I dabbled with a little bit of everything. You know, I had bearded dragons, I had monitors, I had chameleons, I had it all. You know, and I really just kind of fell in love with the geckos in general. So I kind of like went that direction. Um, there's definitely some geckos I would that you know that are on like a wish list that I would love to work with. I just don't know if a few of the species is just not really something that would probably kind of cater to my lifestyle and you know to my keeping. I wouldn't say I'm not capable of doing it, but just you know some of the leaf tail species are just you know fantastic and just so pretty and so just different. But you know keeping cooler temps with the types of cages that they need, the types of care that they need. It's like keeping a chameleon. Like you really got to be on point with your humidity. You got to be on point with your temperatures. There's not as much fluctuation and give or take with that type of a species. I haven't had them in the past, but it beats almost too much work at this point with my collection to kind of dabble with something like that. Now, if I was just focused on like leaf tails and you know alone, then yeah, 100% I would do it. But you know, with the 2,000, 10,000, however many gecko species there are that are out there, it's hard. There's so many. I would say the gosh, what are those ones? The live bears from New Zealand, the green ones, the Nephrus or whatever they're called.
Yep.
Those have always been a huge like a dream species of mine. Soup's just super cool, just really cool looking. Definitely different with those white spots that they have, the white markings on that like bright green color. And being a live bear is always kind of something really cool. I'm really I love monitor lizards, so I would definitely love to get maybe into some of like a couple dwarf species of monitors.
Okay.
Down the road. I wouldn't do it unless I was like dead set on having the space. I wouldn't just get them and get like a 50-gallon tank. Like I could do that. You know, I would want to have like a, you know, humongous enclosure in order to do something like that. I would love to another kind of random species outside of geckos. It would be awesome to have like some Gilas. I think the Gila monsters or the beaded lizards, whatever, you know, whatever. Those are just, you know, my obviously venomous species, but just absolutely amazing. I've seen them in person. A buddy of mine has a pair, and they're just so. It's like holy crap, seeing those things in person. It's just like they're awesome, really cool.
We had a person on our last show, I think, say, well, you have your guests on just so that you can tell stories. So I'm going to tell the story, one of my stories. I'm going to take some of your time. Sorry about this, but
no,
it had to be like 20 years ago. I went to a friend's place and he had snakes and hognose and, oh, this is so cool, Chad. And he goes, oh, watch this, Wally. This, you know, his person was there, you know, they shared the business. He goes, watch this, Wally. This is really cool. And he opens it's like, this is a flipping Gila monster. This is crazy. I'm worried now. Oh my gosh, venomous and somebody's going to die here. And he reaches into the bin and he just pulls it out like it was a giant leopard gecko, honest to God, and just holding it. And he goes, no, go ahead, Wally, just the back, you know, it doesn't care. And oh my gosh, this is so cool. And the way he treated it was like, you know, just like a little puppy dog. It was so cool.
Yeah, for being a venomous lizard, they are definitely one of those species that if you take a little bit of time, like really anything, to be honest, but they definitely aren't as, you know, they're not very aggressive. You can pretty much read their body language and types of things too. And if you raise them from babies, you know, like anything else, they're going to become tolerant of humans. So, but yeah, they're just amazing to see. It's one thing to see them in pictures and stuff, but to see them in person is just so cool. And a few snake species. I'm not a huge snake person, but there's, you know, I really like the mandarin rat snakes. Are just, I think, absolutely gorgeous. The mandarin rats, just the color and the yellow and the grays and the pattern that they have are just really pretty. And I do like Amazon tree boas. I think that those have always been another really just cool looking species. The variants and the coloration and the pattern on them are just really, really stunning.
If I were ever to get into snakes, it would be hognose and them as well after that. We have a follow-up question here from Laura, and this is a great question. If you're pulling the eggs from the Tokays and putting them back with adults, what is the reason that you're doing that? Is there a reason?
So I don't pull the Tokay eggs just because they're gluers, but the standing eye eggs I do.
Yes,
yeah, I do.
Yep.
No, you're fine. The only reason is temperature and humidity control. So I also like to. So once the babies hatch, I can monitor too. That way, I'm knowing when the babies are hatching, and those types of things. But I like to I'll grab the babies and I'll put them in like a little deli for about 2 to 3 days, and I just let them get their first shed. And so I make sure that they shed good. There's no stuff shed. They're taking, maybe a little bit of like Pangea, or, gecko diet or something, at first, and then I'll put them back in with their parents. And the only reason I do that is because I don't want the parents to start digging and laying another set of eggs, and then they flip those eggs or roll those eggs, the previous set of eggs, because a lot of the times, they're going to lay in a spot where it's the temperature's right and the humidity's right. And so having like a heat lamp on one side of the tank, she's always usually going to lay in a similar spot. So if she does, bury them or lays in a piece of bamboo or something, there's always that possibility of rolling the eggs that are already existing in there with her laying the new set of eggs, or the baby hatching and rolling those eggs. So it's just more to secure the eggs and keep them from rolling it's just, I know it's a small percentage chance of the eggs being messed up, but it's one of those things to cut out a possibility of something happening. And I do put them back in because of the fact that I've done tests with the standing eye where I've raised babies in separate enclosures, babies together, babies separate, and babies with parents, and they do so much better with the parents. They grow faster, they eat better, they just seem to do better as a group, and kind of following the adults. It's almost like the adults teach them what to do in a sense.
I tell you what, Kris, that makes 100% sense to me. Absolutely. And a lot of my knowledge, what knowledge I have, comes from the fish world. And I tell you what, if you tried to pull discus eggs and incubate them and raise the babies you're going to fail, 5 out of 10 times. And what you get are a little weaker babies, not as big. You leave them with the parents and let the parents in nature do what nature's supposed to do, and 100%, more healthy and vibrant, and 1,000 times out of 1,000 times that's going to work. Did you have something in it?
No.
Okay.
I was going to just put something.
And another thing I would say too with pulling eggs is you're controlling the temperature a little bit. So if the female lays, say, an egg and the temperature is 95, I may keep them on a shelf where it might be like 90, and which means that the incubation time is going to be longer, which then in turn typically hatches out, a little bit longer incubation time, but you're going to get a bigger, more healthy baby than a shorter incubation time. So I try and always push my incubation time with my eggs a little bit longer. You're going to get bigger, healthier babies than you would speeding up the process of incubation time, and you're going to get a weaker baby.
I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to ask this question before asking one of the viewers, but you're talking about incubation temperatures. Are you finding any differences with highs and lows of standing eye or any of your geckos? Do you see that temperature sex determination with any of your geckos, other than leopards and things that we know?
The only thing that I've seen with that is my gargoyles. I don't know if it's a genetics thing from my like the pairs that I have, like the groups that I have, or if it's a, I don't know. My temperatures, like I said, I keep my gargoyles specifically. They're on a shelf, so like they get warm during the day and they get a little cooler at night. So it could, you could have a 15-degree temperature variance
Ooh.
from daytime to nighttime in incubation throughout their 80 days or 90 days. But I get like heavy males for some reason with my gargoyles.
We had Bobby from Gecko Cove on earlier, and he's I don't want to say found scientific. His suggestion and Paul Morlock from the Rack House
Yeah.
have both indicated that, and Paul will say this definitively, that there are male maker gargoyle geckos. And
Yes.
I'll be very honest, about 10 years, we're about 50-50 now. But about 10 years ago, maybe 12, 13 years ago, we were getting square 95% males. And that we had 10 to 15 females going at that time. And we could not get females. If I had a female, I was holding her back so tightly.
Mm-hmm.
So and we weren't incubating the eggs warm. I didn't think so. I don't know. I think that there's more studies to be done with that.
Well, that was a good crack.
Yeah, that was a big.
Nice. That was a close one.
That was a close one. So I don't know. I think that there's more to be found out with these male maker gargoyles. And if anybody has opinions, I'm.
And I think that's possible too, because I do have a couple of my groups are ones that are the males specifically are ones that I've produced from previous generations. So maybe they're carrying that gene on. I kept a male back from all the males that I got, and then I'm using him as a breeder in a different group, and I'm still getting more males. So it's very possible. It's a genetic thing.
Yes. Frank is asking again. We're going back to the Tokays. How is the personality in your Tokays?
I mean, they're crazy. They're the typical Tokay. You put your hand in the cage, and especially the bigger ones, they lunge at it. I mean, they're a standoffish gecko. That's why they got the kind of the nickname, the pit bull of the gecko world, which, pit bulls are great dogs. I have one, so I don't really necessarily think that that's bad, but most geckos are a fleeing type of a species. They're going to run away from you and try and hide. They use their speed to run away, and Tokays are a little more standoffish. I have wild-caught ones and captive-bred ones, and it's pretty similar. I would say actually the captive-bred ones are probably a little more standoffish because they've had human interaction since day one, and so they're like, I'm not scared of you, So, but I do notice that the personality, as far as like feeding time, they'll come up and I'll have a cup of crickets and they will all just come out, and they're not scared of me feeding them right. And, they'll run right up to the cup and dive into the cup of crickets and, rip crickets out and run off. And they're definitely not afraid of me reaching in and feeding them and stuff like that.
And we know that there's instances where people work with them, Sarah
Oh, yes.
Ducart can handle hers without any problem. Same with day geckos. We know people that handle day geckos. It's a lot of work. I don't have the time. I know I don't have the time. Brad,
yeah, and it's the same thing like with the Hoffmann. My Hoffmann, they're a fast species. Their skin can slough off very easily as a defense mechanism. And so, they're definitely one you have to work with. But I have one Hoffmann that when I do shows, he sits on my LED light above my table, and he'll sit there the whole weekend, the whole show, and just lays on the light. And people come up and take pictures of him and pet him and the whole deal.
Oh my gosh. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of maintenance. It really is. I had another question here and I can't find it. I've got a question for you though.
Oh,
yeah, please, Nanette, if you don't mind. How do I ask this? You've gone through a lot of. We talked about the experience. You talked about the changes that you've made. If there was one thing that was maybe an aha moment? And I'm almost putting you on the spot to tell a funny joke, like we talked about before. But if there's you were doing something and you just completely changed because you found better results, or maybe it wasn't the best way to do whatever. Can you think of an instance that really, drove you forward in your hobby of raising animals? Uh, just something that you had to change, or that you heard from somebody else who said, "I'm going to try that." Morning geckos. You're talking about the PVC. That's something that will change here tomorrow. I'll make some
I'll
PVCs.
be at Menards tomorrow.
Yep, you'll be at Menards tomorrow. Anything like that you can think of?
A couple things I would say. One would be referencing back to the keeping a lot of my animals in the same room and using that ambient temperature to cut on the amount of lights and electricity I was using. By having the warmer species in the same room to heat up the ambient from their heat lamps. So I'm not having to put, lighting on some of the things that like it in the low 80s, by keeping my ambience higher, by keeping the animals that like it 95 in the same room. That was one of the things. I was separating everything. Like I had hot stuff in one area, room temperature in another area or another room, and cooler stuff in a completely different room. So I had literally stuff spread out throughout my whole house. And it just got to the point I was like walking crickets back and forth, and I was walking, my sprayer back and forth. And it was just, it was so, stuff was all over the place. And so I finally just was like, I'm going to move everything. I literally I took my bed and my dresser out of my master bedroom and I moved it into one of the smaller bedrooms in my house. And I put everything in my master bedroom. And it just, for me, it made more sense. I'm only sleeping in my master bedroom, just sleeping and getting dressed. And, it's like, I don't need this humongous master bedroom with a bathroom for me to just sleep at night. And so I turned that into the lizard room. So now I have a bathroom that's accessible, easy. I have a bigger room in general, and everything's, for the most part, is kind of in one room. So that was a big change in simplifying things and making my life easier. The other thing was I actually reached out to Paul from Rack House.
Yeah.
Geez, it has more than 10 years ago, when I was really just, I had already been keeping gargoyles for a few years, but I was just kind of talking to him about keeping groups of gargoyles. Not as opposed to just pairs. Everybody was so frowned upon keeping 1.2s, 1.3s, 1.4s. And I had noticed, from following him, he was keeping his stuff in groups. It wasn't just a male and a female gargoyles. So I reached out to him and said, hey, if you don't mind answering, a couple questions about breeding guards, what is your little trick? And he said, surface area. Create as much surface area and no wasted airspace in the tanks. Keep tight crevices in your cages, in your tubs, or however you're keeping them, so the females can get away from each other. The females can get away from the males chasing them around all the time, so they're not getting harassed. And that was a big thing that changed for me. I started. I know he uses a lot of egg crates and stuff. At least he did back in the day. I don't know if he does anymore, but I just started slamming the tubs filled with cork bark. Just cork on top of cork on top of cork. So you have all these layers and levels and all these crevices in between. And it gave visual, separation from each other. And as well as each one of them kind of has their own little kind of crevice that they can go and nudge themselves into and have their own personal space. It's like having a roommate. It's like if you have multiple roommates, you can't all live in two rooms. You need multiple rooms for multiple roommates. And that's kind of how I started thinking about when I was keeping gargoyles. And now, I have 1.4s breeding groups of gargoyles and don't lose tails. I don't have scarring from fighting. I don't have deaths. I don't have any of that happening. And it's just providing all that surface area and crevices for them to kind of have their own little dungeon to hang out in and get away from everybody else.
Well said. And yes, we did an interview with Paul last summer, and he had mentioned, the whole aggression thing. And if they can't see each other, they're probably not going to fight. And he was talking about having it, so tight that the female would wedge herself into one of these egg carton crevices, and the male just couldn't get over to her. So it's like,
Well, yeah, he can't mount her that way.
exactly. So he's like, oh, okay, I give up.
Well, that and multiple feeding dishes as well. That's another big thing. If you have one feeding dish, they're gonna, when you feed especially your gargs and your cresties, they're pretty good with going to the food almost immediately when they smell it. So if you have them all go to the same bowl, they're gonna step on each other. They're gonna, there's that possibility of fighting and flipping the bowl over and everything else. So I provide basically one feeding dish per animal that's in the enclosure.
That makes sense. And if you think about it, nature is all about smells, almost more important than sight. We know dogs and marking, territories and everything. I'm a big believer that geckos do the same exact thing. I've seen geckos rub. So, if one is a dominant and the other is subdominant, and that dominant is all around that food dish, the subdominant, the worst thing that animal can do is go over and take over some of the territory that dominant, including the food dish. So good call, really good call.
And with gargoyles too, especially with gargoyles, the females are a little more aggressive towards other females and even towards the males. When I have on random occasion had a lost tail, it's always the male that loses the tail. Yeah. The females always bite it off. It's never the male biting the female's tail off. It's always the females biting the males off. And so, when you have multiple females in the same enclosure, that's when that visual barrier and all those separation areas definitely plays a little more into a factor.
Yeah, the females of every species is just way dominant and way too much. Something has to be done with that. If you were to draw out a CAD CAM diagram and plan and everything your room right now, what's one change that you would do with your room? What if you could go, okay, I have $5,000. I can't spend it on animals. I have to spend it on I'm going to call it the facility. What's the one thing that you would do to your enclosures, your setup?
Something that I've been slowly investing in is like these PVC stackable cages. I would love to have a whole wall of like smaller enclosures. Something like 8x8 by 12s or something like that. Something that's not going to necessarily be like a full-time enclosure, but more baby enclosures where it's just a little more accessible and easier to kind of go through one cage at a time as of pulling out tubs and pulling the lids off of tubs and going that route, and then being able to hook up misters to as many cages as I possibly can. That would be the hugest time saver in the world.
I know. I'll throw my 2 cents out there, and I talked about this in the last session that we had with was it a Sure Thing?
It was, yeah.
Paul and Lindsay.
Yeah. Or it was the caffeinated lizard. One of the two. I mentioned we used to have 3 misting systems going at one time, and Brad, we need to talk about this too offline. But 3 misting systems, and I had a mistake with one of them. I can't remember exactly what happened, but it aired out, and I had a tank of Chondrodactylus, with 3 inches of water at the bottom of the tank.
Ooh.
And I got rid of all the misting systems at that day. I said, this will never happen again. And I hand mist everything. And for me, and I'm not suggesting, everybody should stop using misting systems. All I'm saying is for me, I felt more comfortable misting by hand and looking at the geckos and spending a little bit more time with the geckos. And misting systems help so much in a consistent, you're going to mist every single day. You're not going to say, oh, but the baseball game's on, so maybe tomorrow. But for me, I felt more comfortable hand misting than doing the misting system.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that's like kind of prevented me from diving into it really heavily as well as is some of the enclosures dry out a little bit faster than another, and if you have that same misting system on all, on like say 10 enclosures, you might have one that gets a little overwatered than another, another one. So it would definitely be kind of a, if I ever did it, it'd be a trial, a trial and error type thing. I definitely, just to avoid what happened to you, is do it in cages where I could have like 6 inches of substrate. So at least if there is a heavy water, faulty of, a cage getting oversprayed, they're not drowning and swimming in, in a pool of water. There's at least, some substrate at the bottom. But it's one of those things that would definitely, I couldn't even tell you how many hours a week it would save me, in misting.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that.
And even setting up an overflow to where it drains. If it, if you get too much water buildup, you have an overflow to where, you could have it, to where it does filter out if you have too much water buildup in an enclosure.
Yeah, Brad's saying just use front opening enclosures and you won't have that problem.
Yeah, you just have flooding on your floor instead of in the cage.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to ask Angie's question here. Angie has a really good question. I'm going to steal Wally's question. You are stealing my question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years in the hobby?
I mean, pretty much like where I am. I never had the intentions on like being like the big breeder and doing this as a full-time gig. I just don't. I don't want. I enjoy it, and I don't want it to become a job where like I'm irritated every day with this kind of the same routine of like getting up and doing the animals, and then you're not appreciative of what you're keeping at that point. So if anything, I'd like to dabble with a couple other species, maybe kind of grow my collection in that sense. I've kind of fine-tuned a lot of my stuff now. I've gotten some things that I liked, and then I got bored of them after a little bit of time and moved on to something else. And I think I'm kind of, for the most part, dialed in with what I'm keeping at the moment. I'd like to get a couple other things, but just, keeping my presence, keeping, I'm a small-time hobbyist that's just doing it out of his house. I don't have like a warehouse. I don't have a huge online presence. I'm not all over Morph Market. I'm not doing those types of things. I'm not doing shows every weekend. I don't want to do that. I just want to kind of like enjoy what I am keeping and try a couple new things out and grow on some of the stuff that I've been working with for a few years. And keep kind of pushing the excitement of, certain species that I think need to be out there in the hobby more, like, like the Hoffmann. I've been pushing Hoffmann for about 12, 13 years now, pretty heavy. And I've seen the growth and the popularity of Hoffmann geckos. And that's, I like to think that I've had some sort of an influence on that. Being one of probably only a couple consistent breeders of Hoffmann geckos in the United States, at least as far as I know. But I run the Hoffmann page on Facebook. I started that in like 2013 or so, 2012, 2013. And I've seen the popularity gain on that species. And I just wrote a huge article that was published in a magazine in Russia on the Hoffmann species. So just like kind of a care sheet type of a deal. So just little stuff like that, just as it, kind of just keep it going and keep living the day to day and enjoying the animals I have. You know what I mean?
Living the dream.
Yeah.
I think this is the hardest thing for people is, we can go all over the place for research and we can network and go visit Facebook and everything and see all these cool animals. And I get. But just, that internal mechanism that you have where you say, I'm good right here. I want to improve. I don't want to expand. I don't want to, for right now, I don't want to grow bigger. I want to grow better.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard for people. It really
It
is.
is when there's thousands and thousands of reptile species out there that, you're just like, oh my God, that's so cool. I saw a picture of this online, and, it's hard. I've limited myself over the years to not dive into like the $1,000, $1,200 geckos or animals. I keep everything like manageable. I spend a couple $100 on animals if I want something new. I really don't dive into like the high end, super crazy stuff. It's I don't want to do that. I don't want to buy something that's so expensive to where it's just devastating if you do lose that animal, or if you can't get them to breed, or something like that. So I keep, like I said, I keep the species that are a few $100s at the most, and I enjoy that kind of mid-range animal species. I would like to expand, like I said before, into a couple monitor species. I just think the intelligence of the monitors is above and beyond any other reptile species that's out there. So it would be really cool to keep a couple monitors.
JP, maybe link in on the chat some of the cool monitors that Kris should be getting. Like what, the lace monitor? Is that one of them?
No, the lace monitor is a bigger species.
Okay,
and they're pretty expensive. You're talking, a few $1,000s, over $5,000 probably an animal. So I'd like to get like more of the dwarf species, more like your pilbras and stuff that's similar to like the Ackies, like those smaller, like 2 foot, bearded dragonish enclosure type of size. Another one that I kept in the early 2000s was collared lizards. I'd love to get a couple pairs of collared lizards again.
We have somebody in Wisconsin that's doing collared lizards, and they are so beautiful.
They're awesome.
He just loves them. Loves them.
The personality on those guys are just so cool. And the fact that they can jump like 3 feet in the air is just amazing too.
I did not know that.
They're like frogs with tails.
Yep.
Okay.
They're beautiful. Babies are so cool.
Yeah.
Since Angie stole my question, I don't have any more questions, and it looks like you've answered all of the questions that everybody has had. This has been a great show. We survived the storm that probably knocked out all of our trees outside. Hopefully.
And we don't have to have them.
There you go.
Yeah, I have a couple animals if you want to see a couple things real quick.
Angie, I hope you're still here. You asked about show and tell.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let me grab them.
I've seen the puppy walking back and forth.
I missed the puppy.
Yeah,
I saw a dog earlier.
That's my little girl. But she's awesome with all my animals. I've had her since she was 3 months old. There she is.
Oh.
Yeah, look at her. She was moving around before.
How old is she? I'm sorry.
She just turned 3.
What's her name?
Okay.
Her name's Callie.
Hi, Callie. You're cute.
Yep. It was the perfect girl name, especially, me growing up in California too. So it was, but she's great. I taught her from pretty much since day one. I pulled the geckos out and I put them in her face, and I let her smell them. I let her get used to them. I normalized the animals around her. And so, a gecko can jump out of the cage and land on her. And she won't, she won't chase them. She won't try and bite them. She won't do any of that. So that was something I had to make sure of since day one. I can't lose the $200 lizard because my dog ate it.
That's very
and then
impressive.
your dog is sick.
That too.
Very, very impressive.
My lights are starting to go off here.
Ours are going to go off pretty quick. That's okay.
Here's a.
Angie's here.
Get this one. Here's a. Oh, good, you can see this, but let me zoom in a little bit here. Here's one of the Pterodactylus.
Which one is this?
This is the Zebricus.
Oh my gosh, that's a big one.
Yeah, it's a girl, so she's a little bit bigger. You know, the females get bigger than the
Yeah.
males do.
Yeah.
Those white
But
lips.
it's just really cool species.
Oh, 100%.
Way more hardy than people give them credit for as well.
That was for us. I had them years ago and then got them back, started breeding them, and I felt like that was a big accomplishment, for me. And love them because now I have a second group downstairs, and I can, if I'm down there at dusk, I can hear them starting to chirp. So
Yeah, here's a Halmahera gecko. Let's
oh
see
my
if it'll stay on my
God.
hand.
Big
Super
gecko.
cool. Really, they're a little jumpy, but like amazing looking eyes.
Oh
What is
my
this?
gosh.
The eyeball on them is just so cool. These come in, they come in an emerald green eyeball as well as a blue, kind of crystally blue eyeball,
Oh my gosh.
which is a locality from the research that I've done. They're from Indonesia, so mainland Indonesia, when they were imported, they were coming in as all green eyes. And the surrounding islands, when they were imported, they were coming in as blue eyes.
Mm.
So it's also a dominant trait. So if you breed a blue eye with a green eye, pretty much every baby is going to be a blue eye.
Oh.
Which is really cool as well. Here's one that we talked about earlier. I know, Wally, you said this one's one of your favorites. The Bawas.
Oh, those are gorgeous.
The color, the orangey color on them is just, this one's like a subadult.
Yes. And the cool thing is, the problem is people know Hainiensis, and Hainiensis are so cool, and the eyes are great, and the body and the stripes. But once they get bigger, they get kind of grayed out. And
well, even the Bawas do. I mean, this is an adult male Bawa. Look at, there's no orangey to them, but they, the males are like a whole third bigger than the females are.
But
just super cool and super docile, really easy to keep.
I think the babies hold their color far longer than the Hainiensis and probably most of the other cave geckos that I can think of, maybe Orientalis.
Well, and the females actually hold a little more the oranginess to them than the males do. I've noticed as well.
Good call.
As they mature. Here's a baby Halmahera.
Oh my gosh.
This thing is, as you can see, the humongous one that I was just holding with the blue eyes. Oh, this is a baby. You can see how small it is. This thing hatched a couple weeks ago. This one hatched on 3/12, so 3 weeks ago. And that will become as big as that, they get about 11 to 12 inches big body. Super, super awesome species to keep.
Why do you think, I look at barking geckos and I think everybody should have a barking gecko or clown.
No, those have been fun. Those have been really fun.
Why is it that Halmahera isn't more readily available in the hobby?
A couple things. So the fact that their skin slots off has been a huge deterrent of people. They read online that their skin slots when you touch them, and people are afraid of that. They've gotten a bad rap because they're technically still imported, so they still come in like the Indonesian imports, and people are selling them on their table for $50, and they just don't do well when they come in imported. So you get that turn off. People, they buy one, then it dies, and then they're like, I'm never buying that species ever again. And it's really not, it's not the species' fault. It's the fault that you bought a $50 imported gecko. And more than likely, the person that bought that $50 imported gecko was not an established keeper, so they didn't know how to take care of it. They didn't notice the signs of a sick animal, or how to, give it dewormer, or those things to get it to health. So then they're kind of automatically turned off from it. Same thing with Tokays. Like, I have shows where I bring captive bred Tokays, and everybody's like, "Oh, look, a Tokay gecko," but they see it on another person's table for $50 and they go and buy theirs for 50 as opposed to mine for 100 or 150. And then, you know, it doesn't last very long and it doesn't eat as well and it doesn't look as pretty and it has a nipped tail or a missing toe. And, you know, it's kind of one of those things that's, it kind of deters people from getting that into that species again. So that's, I've been pushing for the Hoffmann a lot over the past years. I can't tell you how many other vendors when I go to shows that I sell Hoffmann to that end up falling in love with them. And a lot of it has to do with that one male that I bring to the show that sits there on the light the whole show. You know, I think there's been one person out of probably 200 that have asked me over the past few shows, like, or said what they think, that they always think it's a Chihuahua or it's a leachie or it's a New Cal species. So, you know, it's expanding people's knowledge of, you know, they've never even heard of a Hoffmann gecko before, and seeing it in person and touching it and seeing how soft it is, how cool the eyes are, and how docile that they can be if you work with them a little bit. I think it's kind of opened eyes to the fact of another really cool species. Plus, it's very, very, very similar to keeping New Cal species. So anybody that's keeping Chihuahuas and leachies and gargs and cresties, it fits perfect in with their collection already. So
it just seems like a no-brainer, but you just do not see them ever. I'll see them, and I look for weird stuff like this. I'll see them maybe once every couple of years at a reptile show, and that we're talking NARBC Tinley Park or something like that.
Yeah, probably Kurt Lance.
Yeah,
from the rep room.
Yep.
Yeah. Here's one of my really nice guards that I produced this last year.
Oh, nice.
Really cool. I love the blotch. I love blotched. That's one of my favorites. Let me see if I can get it up.
Love the reds.
Yeah, the blotching on them are really cool. I like the blotches more than I do the stripes. That's always been one of my preferences. I don't produce like crazy high-end guards, but you know, I do have a little group that produces really nice stuff like that.
Oh,
some
my God.
Really cool blotching. Yeah.
Nice. Are you doing some selective breeding? Are you working on more blotch, you know, things like that?
I have now. I you know, over the past, I mean, I've been keeping and breeding guards since I think I got my first ones in like 2011, which I actually still have those ones I got in 2011 that are still breeders of mine. I dabbled with like a male with this female and a male with that female over time, and I finally got kind of my groups pretty much dialed in. So like I have a group like that group right there that's like the males orange blotched, the females are orange blotched. I have a brick red female in with them that's also orange blotched, so I get some really nice kind of orangey reddish coloration and blotching from that group. And they've been pretty consistent. And then I have like a striped pair or a striped trio. The male's striped, one of the females is striped, the other female is blotched, but she tends to put out still striped, you know, a decent amount of striped babies. And then I have a couple others that are just like randoms. Like I have a blotched male with a really high red striped female, just to kind of see how that goes over the next couple of years. And then I have like I have a black and white male in with a couple really not super black and white females, but like no coloration, no blotching. But they've also produced one of the females and the male are phantom eyes. So just trying to see how that gene, see if I can get some phantom eyes from that grouping.
Nice.
Which is tough because, you know, the phantom sometimes, I mean, I have a female, she didn't even show phantom eye until she was like 7 years old, you know, before she ever even showed it. So it's one of those hard things to kind of like recreate when you're not seeing it as a baby. And then we'll switch to something different. Here's those bamboo rat snakes.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, super orange. Really, really cool. Not a super huge species of snake, but just got that orange and that cool like black double pinstripe down their back. Just really, really cool snake.
I'm all over that. I love the orange and the black combination.
So that's one, and then this is also the same. This is also a bamboo rat snake. This is just a different locality, and as you can see, that one was striped and really, really, really orange. And this one's from a higher elevation in the Thailand, and this one's banded, and it's a really cool kind of deeper orangish reddish color. Your typical kind of, but you can see it still has that same line down the middle of its head like the other striped ones do.
So, and maybe you said this, but are these variety? Would you say these are varieties? These are not different morphs? Are they?
So they're like it's like a subspecies.
Okay. Okay.
From the research and the people that I've talked to, there's like 4 to 5 different bamboo rats, Thailand bamboo rat snakes, and each one of them is a little bit of a variance in color and pattern. Most of them, the one is striped. The rest of them seem to be banded, and then there's one that's kind of a mix. It's kind of banded and striped. The stripes are really, really faint. But from the reading and research that I've done, is they're from the mountainous area in the forests of Thailand, and each subspecies is like a higher elevation. So like some are centralized in a certain section of elevation, and then as you get up, there's kind of a different variance in each one of the subspecies. So, but they're all still technically considered a bamboo rat snake.
I think there's so many examples of that in the reptile hobby community world. One that I can think of right now is like fish scales. You know, we get fish scales coming into the hobby all the time, but there's multiple different species. I said it wrong. I'm sorry. Different locations that might be subspecies that won't breed together. And people don't know it, and they'll put the male, female, breed, and maybe it's the same location, but there's known, instances where if it's a different location, it might not even breed. So I think there's more of that in the hobby than we're aware of.
Yeah, and Brad's saying subspecies or localities. I think it's kind of it seems to me it's both, because they're not, one's considered the coxeye, and the other one is considered the pulchra. So they're still considered the bamboo rat snake, but they are a subspecies of that bamboo rat snake. But their locality is also separating that subspecies. Almost like, I know they don't really do it with the new cow species, but you have your mainlands and your Pine Island Chihuahua, and they're all still Chihuahuas. They're all still the same, scientific name, and they are a locality difference, but they've never been classified as maybe a complete separate subspecies, whereas these bamboo rat snakes have been classified and named as a separate subspecies, which more than likely they could probably breed, the different localities or subspecies and get kind of a hybrid type of an animal.
It all makes it interesting in the hobby, I think.
Well, they've even talked about now that there's the difference of even some of the crested geckos, that are from certain areas, have certain body shapes are a little bit different, or the coloration's a little bit different. Temperature and humidity levels are a little bit different and a little more tolerant, depending on which section of New Caledonia that they're coming from. So that's where we have as much as the hobby's been around for so many years, it's there's so many things that change on a yearly basis. The fact that crested were considered rhacodactylus for so many years, and now that they changed that a few years ago. The fact that you can get a hybrid Chihuahua bred with a crested gecko, but why can you not do that with, say a leachy and a gargoyle? You know what I mean? Like what,
Yep.
so there's so many of those unknown things that are out there, that, it's trial and error and just, going through the motions and people testing things out and learning new things from testing things, and the popularity of the hobby has really gotten people's minds to kind of go in those directions on like, hey, I want to learn more about this and things like that. So
And then you have people that just grab onto it and just run with it, like you're doing with the Halmaheras. I tried to dabble in the Periodora picta and then try to focus and do different things and try to learn. I think that's one aspect of the hobby that makes it interesting as well.
yeah, I think that's important. I think people like you and I that have I have like 15 different species of geckos, and that suits me. I kind of like the different varieties, but there's some people that just dabble in say new cow species only, or maybe just crested geckos only, and that's important as well, just as much as somebody that that has a variety of animals. Them focusing on line breeding and stuff like that to see what the possibilities are that are out there. I mean, look at where leopard geckos have gotten to, from back in the day where everything was yellow with black spots to, I mean, there's 50 different types of leopard geckos nowadays, and
You see new ones every
the
single year.
possibilities that 40 years ago you would have never thought that you could have like a striped leopard gecko or a patternless leopard gecko or a leopard gecko that's not even yellow. You know what I mean? You would have never thought that.
Pure black leopard gecko.
Pure black.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Gina is asking what kind of Tokay morphs do you have?
So I have all normals. I mean, I'll be honest. I have well, I won't say all. I have a couple that are considered patternless. They're not really technically patternless. They just don't have as much of that orange spotting on them as they do. I have one that was sent to me as a green, and it's just a little more kind of drab kind of base color. It's not that like powder blue base color. It's a little more kind of emeraldish greenish base color. But like 95% of mine are all normals. I love the normal Tokay geckos. The morphs are awesome. I think that they're great. The high reds, the high oranges, the pieds, all of those ones that are out there. But just the powder blue with those bright orange spots on a Tokay gecko is just, I fell in love with that years and years and years ago. So
Yeah, good reason. And Gina's
just breeding normals.
Yeah. She's saying the normals are gorgeous.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. The babies that come out, I have some really nice normals, and the babies are just, the babies come out really dark, but once they get to that like 6-month phase, like the powder blue starts to come in, the orange spots start to really pop, and they're so gorgeous.
Nice.
And I'll tell you what, those things, you can never throw enough crickets. Those still okay.
Dubias. Are you feeding dubias?
I'm allergic.
So
Yep.
I'm going to ask, if you handle dubias, is it the frass, is it the breathing, or do you get irritated on your skin?
Both. So
Okay.
I had dubias back in the day, probably about 10 years ago. I had dubia. I had a nice little dubia colony, which was fantastic because they breed like no tomorrow. And the size variation on them, they were great with the bigger species. They were great with the smaller species. They worked out fantastic. And I had no problems for about probably 8 or 9 months. I had zero issues. I could handle them, touch them, clean the cage out, the tub out, the whole deal. And then one day I was messing with them, started sneezing really bad, and couldn't, didn't think anything of it. Then my hands were itchy. then my eyes were watering, and it took about 3 or 4 times of messing with them before I started being like, okay, is this an issue with the dubia? And I didn't know why, because I'd never heard anything about it. Then I was reading up online that people kind of slowly gain an allergy to it after keeping them for some time. So I started wearing gloves and a mask and had 0 issues, and was like, okay, well, that's it, you know. So I got kind of tired of putting on the gloves and putting on the long sleeve shirt and putting on, you know, a mask and like going in the 90-degree garage in the summertime and dealing with them and sweating my balls off. And it just, I got tired of dealing with it. So I just got rid of them. But to Brad's point, I do have death heads. I have Madagascar hissers. I've dealt with other roach species and have not had any issues. It's just the dubia.
Mealworms?
Mealworms are fine too. So for some reason, just the dubia that I've run into.
So the scary thing is that I've heard both sides of, you know, it will gradually build up. I've also heard I've never had an issue before, and I almost died Tuesday by handling mealworms. So, you know, I guess my point is just be very, very careful. And if you decide not to do it because of allergies, it's probably a really, really good idea.
I mean, again, I would love to have them. The fact that it would save me so much money in buying crickets.
I know.
But the fact of just like almost suiting up like you're in a hazmat suit every time to deal with them it was just too much.
Not worth it. Not worth it at all.
No, I'm considering trying out some like red runners. I've heard really good things with the red runners. I know that they can't climb and, you know, those types of things, and they don't bury, which is another problem with like the death heads. They bury themselves down in the substrate a lot. You know, they can't climb, but then they bury themselves. So it's like, you know, it's just trying to find that right species that's gonna kind of cater to your needs. You know, I don't want to colony of roaches inside my lizard cages.
and the red runners, that's why I moved away from them and did dubias, because I couldn't adjust to having something that fast and pulling out something and having one of those, you know, get off of a piece of cork bark or plants and having an issue there. So, you know, we've got to do what we do. Yeah, I'm not a huge red runner fan, Brad, at all. It's just
okay.
Yeah, I know. It's just me. You do what you feel comfortable with, but especially from a health standpoint.
Yeah, I only have a handful of species that do, you know, strictly insects as it is anyways. So, you know, a lot of Pangea and, you know, obviously, and supplementing with that. But, you know, my Tokays, they have to have insects, and a couple of the other species, you know, the cave geckos and the Cerdactylus, they have to have insects. So,
have you tried Pangea with the Tokays, or is that a no-go?
No, I have it, and they will dabble a little bit with it, not enough to be like a staple diet though. You know, the younger ones seem to be a little more interested in it. You know, as opposed to the adults or the sub-adults, they kind of stick their nose up to it. But the babies will check it out. They'll lick it a little bit, but they definitely don't stay there and like clean out the bowl like, you know, your new cow species and stuff. So
yes.
It would never suffice as a staple diet.
Yeah. Brad has given us a suggestion. We should do the red runners again and just have free range house chickens to eat the red runners when they get loose. Is that an idea?
No.
No? Okay.
Bread used to be.
Just get it here. I'll send you a Tokay, and you can just have a free range road Tokay gecko.
Oh yeah.
And then we'll go from 1 to 100, and the problem's solved. Done deal.
Nothing at all.
Any more show and tell, Kris?
No, those were just a couple of things that were just a little bit different.
Yep.
Outstanding,
Perfect.
outstanding,
Thank you.
and especially showing the snakes. That's something that I've never seen before, and great
And
conversation.
we'll never again.
And we'll never again. Nanette says, that's funny. Um, Wealth of information, Kris. I can't. I've watched some of the videos, especially the pterodactylus, obviously, a
Yeah,
couple of times now. Great, 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 great video from
appreciate that.
Gecko Exchange podcast, and I appreciate the information that you brought today.
Yeah, thank
Especially
you.
all the notes on the morning geckos that I'm going to be working on tomorrow for sure.
By all means, try it out. I think it'll definitely help you a little bit with especially with the collection of the babies. It'll make your life easier.
Yes, love it. Anything that makes my life easier is a big, big, big plus. Need that time.
Now, if you don't mind me asking you, what
Yeah.
are your favorite couple species that you're actually working with now?
It'll change in 5 minutes. I've done 2 top 5 geckos, and I think that the list have maybe one on both lists, and that's the gold dust. I absolutely love the gold dust, and now the Hawaiian blues, obviously. But the number one is always going to be Periodor picta, because it's easy for many, many reasons. I'm not going to get our viewers know. I love them and love working with them from a breeder standpoint, and also from, hey, would you like to hold a small, little gecko, and mom and dad all of a sudden are holding too. So it shows they're by far our winners. So Periodor picta for sure, and gold dust for sure is in that top 5. I would say at this point now, scorpion tails are way up in the top 5, maybe number 2, maybe number 3, something like that. Barking geckos are still way up there.
Yeah. Is that with the scorpions? Is the cardi or cardi or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah, cardi.
Yeah, that's exactly what.
Okay.
The reason I love them is that they're always sitting out. They're always watching. I throw crickets in, and they just hammer the crickets. They're good together. I have pairs together, but they're just observant. It seems like they're smart. They're watching. They've been watching us the whole time.
Yeah, they're out and about and not scared and stuff.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
I can go in there and I can lift one up, and eventually I'll be, this isn't cool, and it'll jump off. And but yeah, cool gecko. Absolutely in my top 5.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They were 2 or 3 years ago by any means.
Yeah, that's another one I'm surprised you don't see a little more often in the hobby.
I think we have. I think we're that slope is peaking way up right now. There's a fellow in Michigan that's doing a lot of them, and I think that there's little pockets around the country of people that are now keeping. Frank, God help me, Frank Payne, yeah, is doing a lot. He's doing a great job, and he's educating and sharing, and that's super cool. And I think that we'll see more and more of these. Joe Hop is doing scorpion tails, so. Yeah, that's going to be cool to see more people working with these animals.
Yeah, that's great.
Great show, fantastic show. I've had you here over 2 hours, Kris. This is crazy.
Yeah, that's all right.
Great time. Love talking geckos, and again, wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you coming on. I'm glad that we held off from the storm for sure.
Yeah. Went over.
Appreciate your time. Anything you'd like to leave our viewers with?
No, I mean, by any means, if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out. I'm not one of those keepers that likes to hide information from people. I'm always happy to answer questions and help out where I can. It's one of those things that being in the hobby for so long, there's, especially with the internet nowadays, there's so much different information out there. Not saying that I know exactly what I'm doing by any means, but if I can give you some tricks and tips to try that you maybe haven't run across and tried, I'm always happy to share that with people. just to give them a, another set of eyes on the situation, I guess you could say. So, definitely the Halmahera Gecko page. I run the Halmahera Gecko Facebook page. So people that are interested in Halmaheras or have never heard about them, definitely go check out that page. The title is Halmahera, and then it's Gyra marginata. Is the scientific name is also on the title. So there are two Halmahera pages, but it's that one. I actually put in the featured tab at the top of the Facebook page is a full written out care sheet that I wrote about 6 or so months ago. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and it's full breakdown on where they're from, how to keep babies, how to keep adults, how to breed, what to feed, what temperatures, humidities, all those types of things. So just a great insight if you're interested in Halmahera geckos. I have a few friends that have also bred those, so I got with those guys as well, and just got their kind of input on the situation, had them read over that care sheet. So I think it's a really good care sheet that was kind of overdue, because it's really hard to find a good quality care sheet on Halmahera species on the internet. They're still mislabeled as borax, unfortunately. So yeah, the Halmahera page is a good one, and if anybody's looking for Halmaheras, I always have babies. I have probably 30 plus Halmaheras right now, so quite a few. Yeah, I have babies. I have multiple bloodlines as well. So yeah, if anybody's in or near Charlotte, I'm always at the Charlotte Repticon. Would definitely love for people to come by and say hey, and say that they saw me on the podcast. That would be awesome. But just I have a huge passion for animals in general, but reptiles has always been a huge part of my life. So sharing with other people as much as my experiences over the years is just it's an honor. I enjoy doing stuff like this and being on here, and not everybody gets to go on the internet and talk about their hobby. So.
Well, the honor is ours. The honor is ours 100%. And the wealth of knowledge that you've shared is greatly appreciated from everybody in the chat. And obviously from Nanette and I. We really appreciate all of your time tonight and coming on the show. This is perfect. The link to the Halmahera Facebook page, I'll put that in this video's description so people have that readily available for sure.
Yeah, great. Yeah, appreciate that.
No, our pleasure entirely. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by.
Asking all the questions.
Asking all the great questions.
Yeah.
Everybody, good luck. You still have teams in the Final Four, and good luck with your pools and watching. Thanks, Kris. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.